T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Launch Sequence Podcast, your old space game podcast where we generally just talk about Star Citizen, balance, future, past, what's going on, what's the latest drama, what's the latest news. This week we're talking spaceships, and if you've been paying attention, you know that spaceships are a hot topic. The Corsair has seen some changes, the Redeemer has seen some changes, and in general, more and more ships are going to see changes. Today I've brought in a pretty prolific ship reviewer, I might say, on YouTube, EvenLease, and we're going to talk about some of the changes that have been going on, why they happen, if these nerfs are on purpose, if they are going to continue to change the game for the worse, and just a general ship discussion. So hope you guys are interested in ships. EvenLease, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I saw you last year at CitizenCon and wanted to say hello, so I'm happy to get this chance now.
Yeah, you were saying you're not going this year. Do you think you might go next year if it's back in America?
Oh, absolutely. If it's
Cool.
back in the States, it's definitely something I'm planning to do. A little bit
Cool.
harder to get out when you have a 7-year-old right now. So
That's fair, but 7 years old is right about the age when you can start using a new turret gunner, a co-pilot.
absolutely, absolutely.
Well,
but
I will,
flying 20 hours, not so much.
that's true. That's not as much fun, even in Star Citizen. Well, I will probably run into you next year. Sorry we didn't get to say hi last time, but man, that was a good time. Did you have fun at the last CitizenCon?
Absolutely. I thought it was a blast. Just the moment you walk in, the whole like atmosphere just put you there. And I'm super
Yeah.
excited to see what this year's looks like. I'm super jealous anybody getting to go.
Yeah, it seems like they're really gearing it up for a Squadron 42 focus. Got it looking like a bangle. I wonder if the whole second day is just going to be like a Squadron 42 information and marketing kind of event for them.
I hope so. It would be the smart move, right? Because I feel like they're getting a lot of heat lately, and if they really want to start digging out of that, they should really get some more info on Squadron 42 out as soon as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, maybe they should also answer the call, please, and thank you.
Yeah.
So today is a conversation about ships, and before we jump into it, I'd like to give everybody the chance to kind of get to know you if they haven't seen your content before or anything. What do you do when it comes to Star Citizen content?
Absolutely. So I do 10 minutes or less ship reviews. Sometimes it goes over that mark, like with like the Carrack or something, because those ships are massive and it's just going to get worse when you have something like the Polaris. I do like to do other things like role play videos with like doing cargo runs and everything like that. But my primary focus is ship reviews, getting as much information out for the player as possible. If they're new, if they're not new, if they've never seen a ship and they kind of want to know what a ship is before they go and use their credits in game or before they rent it or before they buy it with real money. I want them to be able to get a chance to look at it and see it without having to spend any money on it, and it really helps out a lot of people, hopefully. I have a lot of fun doing it, so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
It's an important kind of video for a game with this many ships
Absolutely.
in it.
Yeah,
What got
over
you
200. Oh,
yeah. What got you into that? Was it like you just really liked the ships? You saw a hole in the YouTube market, I guess, for lack of a better word, or
honestly, I love flying so many different ships in the game, and then my son loves seeing them. And so my first thought was, I'm just going to make videos so he can watch them and enjoy them. And because I just enjoy having fun making these videos, I never really thought about it in the sense of getting a huge viewer base and doing it like that. But now that it's kind of going that way, I'm super excited because it's just being able to spread that information further to people and really help them out with their decisions, because it's such a costly expense. It's like
Yeah.
even if you're just doing it in game, I mean, you spend a lot of time, making the UEC to buy these ships, and you don't want to make that mistake of, I got this ship, I wasted all my hard work and time, and now I don't like it. So I'm hoping to give people that answer before they really get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially since you can't sell ships back yet. I wish, like,
Right.
I really hope soon we can sell things like ships that we've bought for a UEC. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Or stolen, maybe.
Right.
So getting straight into the ship discussion, My first question for you is maybe it might be an easy one, might be a hard one, but I think it's a fun one. What is the best ship in the game, in your opinion?
See, that's just it. It's my opinion, right? But the best ship in the game, that's so difficult. There's so many
Yeah.
good ships in the game, and then there's
Yeah.
so many ships in the game that just are in a really rough spot, right? So what is like the ship that is currently the most accessible in 3.24? I would have to say the Constellation Taurus is going to be your best bet because it's not only got good firepower, but you're able to do so much more with it. And that's the one I feel the most comfortable with. But is it like the funnest to fly? I don't know. But I feel like that's kind of like the best overall ship currently.
It's funny how long we were waiting for that one when we got the Constellation. Like it was one of the first multi-crew ships in the whole game, right? We got that years and years ago, but it was just the one model. I think it was the Andromeda for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Andromeda.
And then they finally got the Taurus in. And I got to say, I'm not a huge Constellation fan, but it's really nice the way the tractor beam is set up. Like it makes a ton of sense, obviously, but being able to load the cargo boxes into that cargo hold is super easy with that thing.
Absolutely. And I feel like with the new Zeus coming out, they're starting to realize just how important that tractor beam location is. Just seeing kind of like the pre-release snaps of that tractor beam, it's like this is what they need to do in the future with all tractor beams. They should honestly, during the gold pass and the components pass for all previous vehicles that have cargo capability, kind of relook at how they're situated with that. I think anything that's meant to carry cargo, if it doesn't have a tractor beam, it needs to get one. It really does.
It is very interesting just how obvious it is when you see a ship come in after the gameplay has been made versus before, and how they just have these logical choices that have been made. And I don't know, how do you feel about that? Do you think that they should have been able to plan around that back in the day? Like the Caterpillar's tractor beam should already be in a better position than it is right now? Or do you kind of give them a pass that they're starting to see it as cargo gameplay becomes more physical?
Yes and no. Like some ships that don't have them, you kind of thinking, well, why didn't it have it in the first place? You know, it's a cargo ship. Why is that not there? Ships like the Caterpillar, they already had it kind of designed out, so they should have already kind of known the position. So I was kind of surprised by that, honestly. Like it's not very helpful to have a tractor beam that you're only able to do so little with. And the positioning of that, I think they could have seen that a little bit sooner. But I mean, obviously things kind of evolve as you go, right? As you're making a game, things change on how you're going to pick items up. Things change on how things work. I mean, it went over to tractor beams and it's a lot more complicated now. So hopefully they'll figure that out quick. And I don't know, where do you think they're going to, do you think they're going to move the tractor beams on the ship at any point?
Do you remember the when the Zeus CL came out, there was a concept art of it kind of landed on a landing pad at a space station, I think it was, or something. And you could see like the telescoped tractor beam sticking out from the back.
Yep.
It's like the first sign that the Zeus would have a different setup for its tractor beam. And they didn't put that on the Zeus. They did the whole articulating arm thing. But I do wonder if they could do something like that on the Caterpillar, where you can just slide along a rail out from the command module and just like move to each new compartment, you know, along the length of the ship with the tractor beam.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be really nice. It's just like the Argo raft. It's such a capable ship due to its exterior cargo, but you have to be outside of the ship to do anything with that, and that's super disappointing. You even have like a dedicated console to be able to move your cargo around, and you don't have any operation with it. So I'm super excited to see what they do with that, if anything. And I mean, come on, the ATLS, that you can't even mount that on the raft. Don't get me started.
It'd be funny if you could just like have that thing tractor itself to the outside of the ship and hold on while it's flying around.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I was thinking it would be cool if that thing was magnetic, honestly.
Yeah, that would
Stick
be
it to
pretty
the side
cool.
of cargo ships.
Oh man, it's both, it's daunting and exciting that we know all the ships will get updated to be more functional in the ways that these newer ships are. But man, they've got so much work ahead of them, and you can see that they're kind of trying to build up the vehicle team to do it. But I think everybody's a little bit worried at like, what is it going to look like when Star Citizen does reach you guys 1.0? Are all these ships going to get enough updates to be equal? Or is it going to be like the newer ships are the ones everybody wants to go for because they're just functionally better and make more sense.
Given the current track record, I feel like we're going to see a lot of component passes over the next year. A lot of these ships that need these refreshes aren't going to get the refresh that they deserve, honestly, but they're going to just get
Yeah.
like their passes. They're going to get their components. They're going to get some additional things like the fire extinguisher and, all these engineering things added, but they're not going to get the true love that they need. Like if you look at the Constellation series right now, they got some updates in the newest PTU version where like even the table works. And I was super excited about that. And they added certain things for it, but it's like, they're not going to be doing big refreshes on these ships for a while. So it's too bad though. I'd like to see the Titans, the Avengers series get a big upgrade. I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think all of the ships that fit into that quote unquote starter category should be getting updates like at least every couple of years, if not every. Like those should be the best experience, bar none. The new player experience should be the best.
Absolutely. That's what's getting people into the game, right?
Yeah.
So the first time you get into your spaceship, you need to be jaw on the floor, right? About what you see. And nobody's entering. I don't think anybody's entering the game with a, $150 spaceship, but if they are, more power to them. but you get like a starter ship like a Titan or a Cutter. The Cutter's in a fantastic spot, but then you look at the Titan, which is a great ship, and you're like, wow, what's with this interior, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because the Titan was like for years it was the go-to. People would suggest to new players getting in, and I think it still is a pretty common.
Still it is, yeah. I still feel like it is.
Still pretty common one, but like you said, the Cutter it feels better. It's a Drake, so it shouldn't necessarily feel like objectively better than an Aegis ship unless you like the design, but it feels like it's more finished.
Right. Yeah. Drake ships. Yeah, you should be scared to fly those things, but it definitely does feel more finished.
So in your opinion, yeah, you kind of answered this when you were talking about the Constellation Taurus. What makes a ship good in Star Citizen? And we can generally focus this discussion around mainly one-person ships, like anything from your Pisces up to your Constellation, kind of.
Okay. I mean, it's all based on the player, right? Because what makes a ship good is all dependent on who you are and what is good to you as a pilot. I mean, that's a general answer, honestly. But to be honest, it's just going into a ship or a single seat ship and it being able to do more for you is what makes a ship better and better, right? So it's not just about getting into a ship and going after a bounty target and then that's the end of your day. But being able to do that as well as being able to have maybe an interior to explore your ship, to do more with, to live in, that's kind of where I start to feel like a ship gets better and better. But that's not cutting out the ships that don't have interiors. It's just if you're looking for a ship that's going to do more for you, then you want to aim for something like that. So that's kind of where I see when ships start getting better is when you start having more accessibility to all the other adventures around Star Citizen, right? So it can't do everything, but being able to do at least your basic stuff is kind of where I feel like a lot of newer ships should be.
Like carry a couple of boxes, maybe defend yourself against a light attack.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's a spaceship, and if they ever want to go down the route of Death of the Spaceman, these ships got to be more complicated. Sometimes I feel like even for a single seater or a single person ship, it's like you can't just be in a pilot seat and that's the end of it. I mean, a lot of these some of these ships, of course, that's it because it's just a fighter. That's just its role. Yeah. But I think they're trying to figure that out right now. There's so many unannounced ships right now. That's going to be super exciting to see what those are over the next 3 to 6 months. But the Zeus is going to be like their landmark ship over the next month and a half until the Perseus comes out. Not the Perseus, the Polaris. I wish the Polaris. Yeah, where's the Perseus? I was reading something on that earlier.
Perseus is a pretty cool ship. And the Zeus is a good example of just how much their ship construction has come from what it used to be. I mean, you compare like a Zeus to a Freelancer Max, which they're kind of in the same class, and it's night and day.
Absolutely. People are going to be kind of disappointed they can't carry an Ursa with the Zeus, though. That's I'm super surprised by that, to be honest.
I think that does a good job, though, of like hitting that sort of what is a good ship kind of question, because there's trade-offs, right? Like you were saying before, some of these ships you would think would have a tractor beam don't. And so that kind of makes a player be like, well, I like this ship. It's got the capacity I want, but I also want a tractor beam, so maybe I'll go for this one instead.
Yeah, exactly. Because the freelancer, it's been around for a very long time. I remember exploring the original freelancer and the hangar module before we even had the persistent universe, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a ship that's been around for so long, and then you compare it to something like the Zeus, and the Zeus puts it to shame in a lot of ways. But then you go back and you go, well, what do you really want to do in Star Citizen, right? Because the Zeus is going to be amazing and the details going to be fantastic. But then the second you want to carry an Ursa or a Nursa, you're looking at the Max, or you're looking at something that can carry something that size,
Yeah.
and that changes the whole aspect of how you want to play the game.
Yeah, I think they should be really wary of that too, because there should be a reason to keep a small ship. Like a Pisces can't fit a vehicle inside of it, but there should be a reason that it's not always just about getting bigger and bigger ships or getting like the more expensive ship or whatever. I think that goes a long way in building health behind how people are considering ships and not just constantly trying to get the next best thing.
Right, absolutely. A lot of it, and a lot of people don't realize there's gonna be overhead to these ships sooner or later, more than there is
True.
already.
Yeah.
Like just the simple repair costs and rearming costs, and your fuel costs. That's not going to be the end of it, really, and it's going to get kind of worse over time too, because when it comes to balancing changes, they're going to make these things cost more money, right? Because they don't want people, every single person in the game flying around in a Polaris all the time. So that's why there's going to be that big difference, and why you want to have your small ship compared to your big ship, and why that's more practical on the daily.
Just taking a Polaris out as a little taxi up to the space station. No biggie. Just
Yeah,
whipping out this Polaris, lift
right.
off
As
from
you
Lorville.
dump 200,000 AUC in fuel. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's insurance, the components. We'll talk about the components, and we'll talk about these balance changes you're talking about in a little bit. But the components, I'm really interested in seeing how can they mix that in to make it so that the ships aren't necessarily the thing everybody cares about the most. It's more like, can you get that rare component? Can you craft that component, keep it insured, and all that kind of stuff?
That'll be pretty interesting to see, because right now ships are all around a health pool, right? Like you got this health pool that's the life of your ship. So you start getting shot at and you get blown up, that's the end of it. But in the future, that health pool disappears and it's all about that component. So having certain components that could be more valuable than others and do better, and be able to sustain more of an impact from an attack or something, it'll be very interesting to see how components play a role in the game. Are they gonna do that? Is there a chance that you could stumble upon a rare, you know, power system that's gonna be able to do more for you compared to the normal one you'd buy over at Cousin Crows or something?
Yeah. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of potential there. I hope they can really expand on that. Speaking of components, one of the things that Star Citizen doesn't have that people have proposed in the past are player-built ships. Do you think with all of this kind of balance with components and the way that these ships are supposed to work compared to one another, do you think the game could ever work with player-made ships?
Not for a while. I mean, I feel like it's got potential, but I feel like the game has to be completely out for, in what it is. And then at that point, have player built ships go through a review process by the team, by Cloud Imperium Games, and let them actually approve or deny such ships, because it needs to fit into the universe of Star Citizen, right? They even have trouble right now kind of concreting what that is. And so having player built ships enter the equation, if that ever becomes possible, it'll be a lot further down the road, because and
Yeah.
it's going to have an extensive review process, because they can't have something that's just going to be way overpowered, and they're not going to let something get released into the game that's also not good for the game itself, right? So that's something. It's a good question. I feel like it would be really cool to see, but it's going to be a very long time.
Yeah, it's even the Redeemer was a player designed ship, and we've seen just how much that ship has had to change over time as they brought it into the game.
Absolutely. Everybody loves guns. Lots of guns.
Yeah.
So you build your own ship, you're going to put a lot of guns on it. Yeah, look at this salvage vessel. It's got 18 guns, but
It's just bristling with firepower.
right, right. So that's going to be prone to a lot of changes, and it's not going to be always a happy change.
Yeah. That's and dude, CIG likes guns too. I always freak out about this when I'm like on the stream or something with the community, but I'm always like just blown away by the fact that you'll find the Argo Raft having having a concept
Absolutely.
image marketing it with like it's shooting its guns, or like I saw the other day the medical Pisces has a concept image of it just like flying into battle with both guns firing, missiles coming off the windows, and I'm like, this thing is basically an ambulance. What's going on here?
Right. Yeah. It almost makes it feel like the whole universe is at war all the time. Like,
Yeah.
you know, during, and I know they have like the flight model, they want it to represent like World War II or something like that, right? At least that's the idea behind it, which, whatever. But when it comes down to this, it's like almost like everything's armed as if we're in a wartime situation. And that's always kind of got to me. I was like, why is a certain ship have guns on it? Like, you know, there's medical ships and stuff nowadays that don't even have guns on it when they go into war zones, right? So there's the, you know, why do some ships have that in game compared to others that do? I don't
Yeah.
understand that. But it's a touchy subject because a lot of people think it's 50-50, right? A lot of people think everything should have a gun, everything should have pilot damage. But there's a whole crowd out there that doesn't agree. Like a salvage ship
Yeah.
shouldn't have a gun, a mining ship shouldn't have a gun, and I'm 50-50 on it as well. Sometimes I do think it shouldn't have one. Sometimes it should.
And we'll be talking about pilot damage in the Corsair in a little bit.
Oh boy.
That's a big topic, yeah. But I mean, I understand. Like, Star Citizen it's a dangerous fiction. Like, there was a Cold War for hundreds of years. There's the Vandal threat all the time. There's gangs everywhere. You're in systems that might not necessarily be patrolled by the government. And I get that. What I don't get is like when they're advertised. I mean, I do get why they're advertised like that. It's easy to advertise ships like that. But it's just it's so funny the way it's done. Like, who would ever fly into battle with a raft?
Oh, right.
At least have
Yeah.
like a turret shooting backwards at somebody who's chasing you. I'm like, it makes me want to go and try and run an ERT bounty with like a raft and a mole, because even the mole has guns.
You won't last long in a raft, but you can try.
Yeah, maybe you could start flinging boxes at them. I don't know, you get enough speed
absolutely.
going.
Yeah.
You could just Marcos and Aros them. Okay, let's talk about the nerfs, the tweaks, the balances, the way that ships are changed. We'll build up to the Corsair, but the first time this happened that I remember it really gaining traction. Well, actually, let me ask you, what was the first time you remember a ship getting balanced, we'll say, and it like really caused some uproar in the community for an extended amount of time?
Oh man, I'm trying to just think about all the ships that are out there because there's Corsair's been the biggest one, right? And we'll get to that here in a second. Honestly, what was the last time there was a big change? I'm trying to remember.
It
What was that?
I'll give you a hint.
Give
It was
me
a
a hint.
Crusader
Yeah.
ship.
Oh gosh, don't even get me started on the Ion. Oh my
There
gosh.
you go. Yeah.
Oh, the Ion, you're killing me
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite ships, I swear. And I know because everybody this instantly thinks it was overpowered, which it was a pain to use. Like even if you had a, this size 7 laser cannon that shot repeatedly like it did, and it was still hard though because the thing maneuvered like crap. It wasn't the fastest. And they nerfed it into the ground. Like right now it's useless. The Ion, and I honestly think like I don't know what their game plan with that ship is, but I hate that they changed it without having that game plan in mind. Now that they added this charge function, and I've already seen it, hundreds of times where people have come to me and gone, yeah, the ship, I've gone into battle against AI and I'm sitting here trying to attack these targets and they're ripping me apart because this charge function is just not working out. And you can't put out the damage that you used to be able to. And this thing's supposed to go after capital ships. You know, and it's like, how do you go after a capital ship with a ship like that?
Yeah.
When they made that gun practically useless. So doing nerfs and stuff. Go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead. You can finish your thought.
Okay. The nerfs and stuff they're doing just randomly without any real like communication about it, or, you know, communication about the future of what they want with the ship. I feel like they could improve upon that. Absolutely. Because it's like, before you do a nerf, talk to the community. Be like, you know, we see this ship is outperforming where it should be. What do you think should be done? You know, get a little bit of the community's feedback before you instantly change something that's going to get a lot of negative feedback, because then it just puts a sour taste in people's mouth, because they're like, I just spent $250 on this ship and now you are putting it in the dirt. It's useless. What am I supposed to do? That's a lot of money. And whether you spent real money or if you spent the money in game, they instantly just didn't communicate it and was like, here's this. Here's this change. Good luck. And we don't know where it's going in the future. That's just kind of poor. I wish they would have communicated that better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, is that we can all say that, oh yeah, we're currently in an alpha. Like nothing's going to be how it's supposed to be right now because everything is being rebalanced and changed. Like we can even see as engineering comes online, ships are going to change. The balance behind them is going to change. But at the same time, they sell these ships on a certain description. So you can think to yourself, okay, well, no matter what happens during this alpha phase, eventually it will round back around to that description that they sold it on. But they don't tell people that. They don't say, oh yeah, we're bringing the Ion back now because maybe it's it kills some of the balance in the game and it leads to people not using other ships like they should. But we understand that in 4 years, when everything is online, we're going to bring the ship back to what it's supposed to be so that you can hang on to that ship that you spent $250 on and know that it will eventually be what you spent that $250 on, rather than kind of sitting in limbo and not knowing all this time. And I agree with you. I think that there should be some communication about like what the long-term plan is, even if they are changing things temporarily now.
And that kind of, you know, the temporary change that they talk about is kind of a big bummer too. Like they want to do all these temporary changes just to kind of get their base, right? Like their starting point for all these ships. And it's just kind of like doing that with ships that do cost so much money and people have invested into, even though, you know, it says it in the agreement and everything that you're not buying the particular item, whatever. You're buying the particular item. Nobody's going into this going, oh, I'm just sending them $250 and I'm hopeful to get a ship that's decent. You know, they're looking at this ship, they're looking at the Q&A, they're reading all the information, and then they see at the bottom that this potentially could change. But the zero communication from that point to the actual change is where it really just goes downhill, right? Yeah. And I was even like awestruck when they did the change to like the Ion. I was like, what? Where did this come from? I didn't hear anything about their thoughts on this ship until they did it. And then they were like, well, this is why. And it's kind of like, you could have said something prior, maybe gotten the community's vote on it a little bit and seen what would have been the better option. And I feel like that's kind of where you're going to win. Put out a vote, you know, put out an opinion like, hey, this ship is doing much better than it's intended to do. What would be your step to help curve that, right? Instead of just instantly pulling the rug out from under people's feet.
Yeah. And it definitely flies in the face of the whole open development thing, which I think has taken steps back. I understand that they cannot talk about every single small change that happens here and there. But specifically with the ships, which are what funded the game, and like you said, that's what people are buying, messaging around that should be a little bit more, I think, efficient.
Yeah, a lot more transparent on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree. Because, you know, in the end, you work hard, you save up your money, you get into a project like this that's not complete yet, and you buy something behind an idea, and you understand that it could potentially change in the future, but you're thinking that you're going to have communication on that, right? Because it's a company that really sells himself on having that open communication. And then you don't get that communication, and then you wake up one day and your ship's completely changed, and you're like, hello?
or you go away for 2 months and you come back and everybody's like, oh yeah, that happened a month ago. Why are you complaining? Shut up.
Right.
I didn't know. Oh yeah, no, it's a really difficult position to be in, and I think it's just another one of those problems that comes from being in development for such a long time. Is like you got to keep making changes based on how the gameplay develops. The whole thing about medical beds that was this year, changing the medical beds so that some of the smaller time medical beds support respawning changes why people got the bigger ships that have tier 1 medical beds, and like that kind of thing is only coming because the game has been developing how respawning and medical gameplay works for so long.
Right. And we don't even know if that's a permanent change.
Yeah.
There's a speculation that they just did that just to sell the Nursa. And, that's very possible. From a marketing standpoint, why not? It sucks though, because if you look at Death of the Spaceman, I don't think that's going to be possible, right? If they're still on track for that, which we don't even know anymore. Like we haven't heard anything about it, right? So the medbed change is kind of like a ticking time bomb, I feel like, because they're going to have to do something about it. And whatever they do, since right now it's at like the best point it can be, it's not going to be good. The community's not going to like it because it's going to go downhill. I don't think there's really any way you can go uphill with the med bed because it's already got its respawn function. So what can you do next?
I think the best thing they could do is link respawnability to a consumable resource, make it so that Death of a Spaceman has a much larger pool of lives, make it hard to die, and then still have that whole permanent character death at the end of it all. So like you're still not terrified to die, but you're paying attention to how much you die. You're not throwing away lives because your vehicle could run out of respawn resources, and you still have that easy ability to get back into the game wherever you are, or spawning at like a public medical ship if they have that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of the many game design questions that I'm not jealous of them to have to figure out.
Yeah, and there's no transparency on it either. They haven't talked about it, right? They haven't given us an idea of where that's going to sit in 2 years. Because right now, if you can see, they're bringing everything in. So they've started this process, and they're going to get everything to a base point to where they can start exploring what Star Citizen is going to be.
Yep. Yeah,
the design's finally. Go ahead.
The design is finally starting to become code.
Absolutely.
At long last. All right, so let's talk about the Corsair. Well, actually, first, before we move on to the Corsair, what do you think is happening with the Ion? Why do you think they did what they did with the Ion, and how do you think they could balance it so that it does make sense? So it's not an overpowered ship people are using for dogfighting, but maybe it's a good ship to just kind of paint capital ships with damage.
Well, don't touch his gun, first of all. Touches overall everything else, right? So the gun was fine where it was, but the ship was just too maneuverable for what it is. It's a gun with wings, right? This ship shouldn't have the thruster power to be able to maneuver a fighter. To be able to dogfight with a Gladius or an F7 or something like that, that's not where it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a ship that was developed and is out there on the field to go after big ships. It doesn't particularly have to be a capital ship like the Polaris, but big ships like, the 600, the Carrack, ships like that should be easy for an Ion to disable. I mean, maybe if you're going to touch the gun, change it from pure damage to pure disablement, right? So it doesn't particularly destroy a ship, like rip it apart, because I know that's where the Inferno is supposed to come in. The Ion's supposed to drain the shield. It's supposed to drain the system's power, right? And then the Inferno comes in and cleans up the mess. It wipes it out by putting just pure ballistics down on that target. So maybe what the Ion should be is like just a pure energy sucking machine, right?
Like where it
attacks,
damage.
Pure distortion. It comes in and attacks its target. It wipes out its shield, but it doesn't just stop there. Like this thing starts like massively hindering your systems. to the point of where it's going to disable your ship if you don't get out of there. I think that could be a better spot for the Ion, because then it's got a really intended role and it's kind of still in its where it should be. In the Q&A, that ship was like, hey, you're supposed to be wing to wing with an Inferno, because this thing takes out the shield, the Inferno does the damage.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're gonna, why add this charge ability, keeping some damage to it, and then expecting you to be okay with that, right? Because then now you can't do anything. You're sitting there trying to charge your weapon to do good damage while you're being circled. It's just terrible. Yeah. So I feel like if you're going to touch the gun, up it with distortion damage, because now we're getting rid of health pools. We're heading down that road. So let it affect components big time, right? Once it gets through that shield, let it affect the components, and, drain its maneuverability. That's fine, because it's not supposed to be a ship that's highly maneuverable and able to, keep up with all those smaller ships. It's a big ship.
That's what's kind of what you're saying there is what's making combat more and more interesting to me now. I'm not into combat really, but bringing in components, changing the way that damage is communicated between ships. It's not just like you're ticking down a health pool and then you blow up. You have some strategy. E-War can come in, and by EMP, you can disable people's scanning functions. You can disable shields. You can disable components. You can repair components. All this stuff complicates combat to the point where it's like, it makes sense that they almost couldn't balance combat as well up until they started to understand better, or rather, they started to implement better how certain types of weapons and certain types of damage could actually strategically strip a ship of its functionality.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's going to be very interesting how the next 6 months go. I'm excited to see what they're going to announce at CitizenCon when it comes to this, because we're going to see more of Maelstrom. We're going to see kind of where that's heading, because that's your big ticket to getting out of the health pool, right?
Yeah, they've got a lot of possibilities at CitizenCon regarding this stuff. I mean, I don't know how much they're going to talk about that they talked about last year. I feel like that if I were them, I would kind of try not to dip too much into that stuff, because the elephant in the room already. But Maelstrom is a big part of the game that it seems like we're only really getting the big updates at CitizenCon for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like if they do talk about this year at CitizenCon, I hope they just talk about their failures. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear where they failed in the office, to why things happened the way it did. That's going to open up the transparency, I feel like. If they're going to start talking about, well, this is why hangars took a lot longer than what we expected, because of, this and that. And this is kind of the future where we want to be. So that's kind of where we ended up right now, and this is where we're going. It would be nice to have that transparency, to kind of get it behind the scenes, to see why something that was promised months ago took more time than it should have been, right? That's kind of something I want to see. I want to see transparency.
they that sounds like a Star Citizen Live for them.
Right.
CitizenCon is their, oh my gosh,
I know, that's their feature, right?
That's their marketing,
what you're going to see over the next year.
Yeah. I mean, and especially after last year, I think up until a couple of years ago, I would have been on that same page. But I think last year really proved just how much a big splash of a CitizenCon can do for them. Brought in so many more people, so many more eyes. It made things much more talked about in the gaming community. And now I think they probably see this CitizenCon as their chance to kind of break mainstream. Not mainstream, but like better than they have been before. And so
hopefully
I imagine
in the right direction.
Yeah. Do they ever get publicity in the right direction?
Right.
I don't know
right.
if they ever.
But the one thing I asked for CitizenCon is I loved how exciting last year's show was. Being there and seeing everything and seeing the emotion of people, seeing these things be announced, and seeing Squadron 42 being feature complete or whatnot. And but I just hope that when they release their goals for the next year, that they're transparent about it. Like, don't put some goal in there that's going to be impossible for them to achieve just to boost the crowd. I feel like it's fun, but it ends up biting them later in the year, right? Kind of what we're sitting at right now.
Well, it ends up getting all swept up in one big bucket too, because I mean, I think there were things that they showed last year that very clearly weren't going to happen in 2024. Things like base building and Maelstrom.
Oh yeah.
But because Chris came out on stage and said, we would like to get most of this stuff in by the end of next year, it didn't matter how many caveats he said. He named off Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. He said by the end of next year, most of this stuff. But all people really heard was in the next 12 months from now, everything will make it. And it's like releasing a YouTube video, right? You put a thumbnail on the video, the rest of the video doesn't really matter. People are mainly focused on what's on that thumbnail. If Chris Roberts comes out on stage and says anything that has to do with any kind of expectations or dates, everything else is out the window. And I feel like if they instead go through every panel and named their sort of expectations and what they want to do panel by panel, rather than having some big speech at the end where you come out and give people some grand idea of how it's all going to roll out, you're going to be much better off in terms of the next year communication, what people expect you to do and all that.
Absolutely. And I personally, I feel like to really boost the crowd this year, I think we're going to see a couple unannounced ships alongside the Zeus get released, and that's going to be very interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see. Hopefully, it's in the realm of competing ships with like the Vulture or the Prospector. We need more of those.
We definitely need more industrial kind of ships, and we need an introduction to drones. And I was hoping that the Vulcan would be that, and then we're not going to get into like a leaks discussion. I know that there's some whispers and murmurs surrounding that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of ships now and a lot of functionality in the game that would benefit from remote operated devices. And I hope we can see something like that this year.
Yeah, that and AI crew. I'm a big fan of the idea of AI crew. I don't think I have enough time every day to get on and get together, 15 people to try out a ship like the Polaris, right?
Yeah.
So being able to spend an in-game amount of UEC to hire a crew just to at least man the turrets at a diminished capacity compared to what a real, human person would be, I think would be nice. They already have the functionality there, obviously, for AI ships. So I just hope that they talk a little bit more on the AI portion of what they're going to be involving in the ships.
Yeah, that would probably calm a lot of fears that people are having when it comes to engineering and stuff.
Absolutely.
Definitely, because it's been a long time since they've really gotten into detail about that. So let's talk about the Corsair. Speaking of, balancing ships and ships needing to match their roles and stuff, the Corsair was originally sold as an explorer, but it is also a Drake ship, which people generally assume means it's more combat focused and quote unquote used by pirates. And there's a couple different angles in this conversation, in my opinion. First, you have the idea that people select ships based off of what the lore is. And the only people who can do that are people who follow lore a lot. So is it responsible for them to balance and change ships based on lore, and to what extent? But then there's also the fact that it was named an explorer and had more firepower than basically any other explorer pointed forward, on top of, the turrets that it has in terms of defense and multi-crew capabilities. So they made this change to the Corsair, basically taking some of the firepower away from the pilot, giving it to the co-pilot in a bit of a weird way. How do you react to that? What do you think of that change?
Again, it was kind of out of the blue. It was only found out by, issue council and then dragged out from there, which was weird. And it was just so random, right? Lore wise, I don't know about lore wise. I don't feel like you can balance a ship based off lore because it's based off the gameplay, right? It's based off of how it does in the world, how it does in the universe, and how it does with so many people. If this thing is way outperforming everything out there, then obviously there has to be a change. But I don't know why they went as drastic as they did. Mm-hmm. But I was actually looking at the new numbers for the Corsair, and I feel like the change, while they took away some of the guns from the pilot, it was still a very strong ship. It was still a very strong ship. And I feel like the change, while they took away some of the guns from the pilot, it was still a very strong ship. And I feel like the change, while they took away some of the guns from the pilot, it was still a very strong ship. And I feel like the change, while they took away some of the guns from the pilot, it was still a very strong ship. And I feel like the change, while they took away some of the guns from the pilot, it was still a very strong ship. And I feel like the change, while they took away some of the guns from the pilot, it was still a very strong ship. And I feel like the change, while they took away some of the guns from the pilot, it was still a very strong ship. And I feel like the change, while they took away some of the guns from the pilot, it was still a very strong ship. And I feel like the change, while they took away some of the guns from the pilot, it was still a very strong ship. And I feel like the change, while they took away some of the guns from the pilot, it was still a very strong ship. And I f it really isn't going to be that negative to the pilot itself, because this thing's still got an astonishing amount of DPS. I mean, this thing sat at 3,100 prior, and currently with the newest PTU build, it's sitting at almost 7,900 in pilot DPS. I mean, that's insane. Because they upped the amount of damage that the weapons are putting out. I mean, they were putting out 565 damage per second before. Now they're sitting at almost 1,400 damage per second on the M7As alone. So while you're losing some functionality of your ship, they're still trying to balance out how the weapons are performing. Now, that obviously probably won't be a final number. That's a lot of damage for a forward-facing explorer, right? And I think they're using that explorer tile kind of loosely because this ship is best at exploring, the inside holes of other ships.
There it is.
That's the concept of what people kind of have in their mind. It's named the Corsair, right? This ship is out there freely taking from other ships, and it's got that firepower to do so. Now, putting those two guns to the co-pilot and then not allowing them to like have that be an active turret, maybe they're going to change that, but like that needs to be able to move around 360 degrees, right? That's a turret. It looks like it. You can see it. It almost looks like it's designed to move completely circular. But if it's just a fixed forward-facing gun, no. Why would you do that? I mean, get rid of that, and just let the pilot control it, but just downsize the weapons, right? Because it doesn't make sense to have forward-facing guns and not have control over their like direction. And if you don't have control over that, they can't be fixed to a co-pilot. You can't expect somebody else to pull the trigger, right? With guns like that. Missiles is different. It's just like today's, fighters. Sometimes the person behind you, you're flying the jet while the person behind you, can operate some of the weapon systems, right? Yeah. But forward-facing guns like that, I think they should bring that back to the pilot. Just downsize it a bit. But I mean, you got an up in the DPS. I'm surprised, and they're changing the shields on it too. The shields dropped from 100,000 to 48,000. So that's going to be the next topic on that ship.
So, just to confirm, they took the control of those weapons away, but technically the pilot has more firepower because of the buff to weapons?
Yeah, so the weapons actually got a increase on DPS. Like I said, I don't know how long that's going to last, but it did go from a little under 600 DPS per shot to the M7A to a little over 1,300. Same thing for the M6As. They went from 378 to 922 DPS. So while you're losing a lot of that forward-facing weapons, I know, right? I was looking at all the changes between ships, and it looks like firepower has gone up across the board. Like the Gladius was under 1,000 DPS, and now it's sitting at like 1,300. I was really surprised by that. I do the numbers all the time because that's kind of a part of what I do with my reviews, right? I go after a lot of the stats. And so I keep an eye on this very heavily. And so you're losing some of the control over those guns, but you're honestly going to have so much firepower behind the pilot seat still. It's going to be unbelievable. It's still going to be a great ship, but you got less shield now. So that's going to be pretty drastic.
Okay. So this is definitely then, they're experimenting, which as they do. I agree with you though, that like the bottom should probably be a turret, but maybe they are going to then wait until the Corsair can get a larger rework to make that an actual manned turret, maybe, instead of what it is now, or a remote turret. But then I both want to say they should have said something about this, but technically, is this in the game yet, or is it still just in like Evocati or PTU or something? Is it in a live build?
It's in Wave 1 now. So it's Wave 1 PTU as of last night. So it's there. It's there, and it looks like, just like the Ion, it's kind of staying. Okay. They haven't talked about reverting it yet. Even with the outcry, probably because they're like, wait until you try it, because with that massive increase in damage, I mean, this thing's doubled in damage compared to what it was, yet you've lost some of that weapons control. Now, I might be reading that, because we're, right now those stats, even if some of that number goes to the loss of control, you're still sitting at more DPS. You're still sitting probably at around 5 to 6,000 DPS for the pilot still. So you're still looking at a much increased number. And so I feel like we got to really give it a shot first, even though it still sucks losing those weapons. That turret needs to be able to move. That, or bring it back to the pilot. Just downgrade the size of the guns. Make those M7As, make them M6As, drop the M6s to M5s, and see what that does, instead of taking away a lot of the functionality that was promised from the get-go, which sucks. I wish they would stop at the promises, because that's the problem, right? Is sooner or later they have to balance the game. And that's when everything's going to change. If people think this is where it ends with the Corsair, I mean, it's going to get worse. There's going to be a lot of ships that we have right now that are going to get pretty drastic changes, because it's got to change. It's got to change for components. It's got to change for losing the health pool, Maelstrom, all these different things. And engineering is going to make everything different. And it has to.
I think best case scenario would be if this update went live and they came out and they just said, hey, the Corsair is what it is right now. We want to update it when there's a big refactor going to the ship. We're going to turn that into a turret on the bottom. It just hasn't happened yet because we're not going to redo the geometry of the ship until it's ready.
Right. Yeah.
But we'll have to see if they do that.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting.
So do you think that CIG should then just, what did they sell the Corsair based on? I know they call it an Explorer. Obviously it has more firepower than most Explorers, but is the amount of firepower that the pilot has something that they sold the ship based on at first? Or was it just something that felt good?
No, absolutely. In the Q&A, they even specifically state that you have control over all those guns, like they're slave to you as the pilot. Okay. So that's why I think everybody's so upset, is because that they're changing that written Q&A to better fit the universe as it is now, which, balancing wise, okay, sure, I understand that, but there was zero communication, and the way that they're going about it is really weird. Why take away the control of those weapons?
And that's a problem with their way of selling ships. They shouldn't be selling these ships based on such specific details. And they know that those specific details get them maybe 10% more sales, but they should just say what type of ship this is supposed to be, give a general idea of where it's going to be when it ends up, and then let the ship change throughout the development as it needs to.
Yeah, giving hard numbers on a ship when it first comes out, it's not a good idea, especially since the game is so far away from complete. Giving hard numbers like, yes, the pilot has control over all 6 guns, and this is how much damage it's supposed to do, or, stuff like that. It's information that is going to change. It's not going to be concrete because you're so early in the development.
And in the FAQ, it is being stated on the side chat here by a supporter that their control will be able to be delegated to another station, but it doesn't feel like it's just being delegated to another station. It feels like it is being completely removed and added to another station. And even just the word choice there, it's the fact that they decided to answer that question in text that causes the ambiguity and the sort of uncertainty to even be there. If they left it completely unmentioned, unnamed, unanswered, at least they wouldn't be held accountable to that previous statement, and they could make those changes as need be. But because they said that could lead to other people buying the ship.
Exactly. Yeah. So you come in with this idea of what this ship is, and then out of nowhere they change it. And it's a ship that's very popular in Star Citizen. I see this ship every time I'm out flying, right? Like this ship, everybody has this ship, whether they bought it in game or they bought it outside of the game. It's very popular because of what it can do. And that's what it was sold on. Now it's changing. Like they have to balance it for the future of Star Citizen, and the way they're going about it just not comfortable. Yeah. Nobody's comfortable with it. And that's understandable. You're losing half your guns, right?
Yeah. Do you think that when it comes to Drake ships in general, they should be, because we talked about this a little bit, lore driving the way that the ships are actually being balanced. Everybody kind of expects Drake ships to be a little higher in firepower, lower in armor strength. do you think it's responsible for them to sell Drake ships and actually have a tangible lower armor value than a competing ship from a different brand? Like Aegis or Anvil is a military provider, so their ships naturally have more armor or are higher quality materials, whereas Drake has maybe less armor with lower quality materials. Is that the kind of thing that you think can be done but needs to be explicitly stated, shouldn't be done because it can mess with a newcomer? What's your stance on something like that?
Well, you know, it's it's going to be interesting because Drake is not supposed to be. I feel like Drake, and this is up to opinion, of course, but I don't feel like Drake's on the same level as a manufacturer like Anvil or Aegis, because they have their brand, right? Drake is made out of what everybody would assume, like multiple different parts. They're more of like a I'm looking for the wording here, but they're pieced together, right?
Kit
They're
ships?
used from, yeah, pretty much, right? They're not like Drake is just they're like that. They like to have their ships built more for like the everyday worker, the everyday flyer, and they're not as well maintained, I feel like, just
See, but
based off of how they look.
that's like a lore explanation, right?
Right, right. And that's kind of where you got to be, is that they do have a lot of firepower because Drake just slapped on a bunch of guns, right? But they don't have as much armor. And I feel like that's totally fair because I feel each manufacturer should have their role, right? Something that they're good at. That shows you who they are, right? Anvil, I feel like, is good for their design. Going into exploration, the Carrack, stuff like that. And then they also have a lot of other ships available that are really nice. Looking at like the Pisces, the Arrow, the fighters. They have a really good competition series with Aegis, and that's kind of where they're at. They're like military competitors, right? Drake is just kind of in the middle. Like they have a little bit of a dip in military, and then they have a dip in like MISC to where they're doing a little bit of cargo. And I feel like each brand should have their pro over another. I think
That's
that's
fair.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as long as it's communicated.
Yeah, it has to be communicated. You can't go into a ship thinking that you can compete with something else just because, you know, it's a starter ship compared to a starter ship, right? But there's going to be a pro to each one of them. Like this one might have a lot more weapons, but you better be careful. You're a glass cannon, right?
Yeah, which we really don't have. There's no real aspect of ship stats in the game. And I wonder if that's something we'll start to see now that they're starting to get Maelstrom Online, Engineering Online, and better combat balancing, or if we'll have to wait years and years for it to reach the 1.0 state or whatever kind of is their beta state for the PU.
I'm surprised they don't actually have. I've always been kind of surprised by this, that when you go into the game and you look at certain different things, it doesn't show you like statistically how it's going to change your ship when you do certain things right from the get-go before you buy an item. Every time I've ever bought an item, there's just no real visibility to what you're changing, right? You see that what it costs, but you don't know what it's going to do.
Yeah.
Like for like a shield generator or a power generator. And I wish that was a little bit clearer.
Yeah, you kind of have to go online, like to and on. I mean, that's one of my complaints about Star Citizen is almost everything that you want to do about this game, you got to go online to do it. You want to find out about an event, go to the website. You want to find a guide, go to the website. You want to talk to other people, find a group, go to the website. You want to find stats about your ship, find a third-party source. You want to find where an item is, third-party website. Everything is outside of the game. And so if you just jump into this game and you don't know that, you kind of learn that you have to have a web browser open all the time to play.
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of, I wish they had kind of like a almost like something in the Moby Glass that you could open up and look at all this information, or you could technically like almost like a Steam browser, open up a browser and be able to be connected to certain websites like that. I think it would be really fun because not having that information available to you in game is a really big bummer. And a lot of newer players won't want to have to alt tab constantly to look at this information. They're just kind of like, well, why isn't this presented to me already? I mean, Come on, that's pretty simple, right? So it would be nice to have that available, whether in the Moby Glass or just when you're looking at the items themselves, or just a straight comparison sheet and how it's going to change things.
Yeah, that would be. Oh my gosh, that'd be great. These are those kinds of
Oh,
little
audio
things
life
that this
fix.
game.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. So ultimately, what do you think they want the Drake Corsair to be good at? I mean, I know you said it's the explorer that explores other ships' holds, but do you think it actually is supposed to be an explorer that stands up to something like a Connie Aquila or a 400i, or is this is it going to fall short of those when it comes to pure exploration gameplay?
I definitely don't think it was supposed to be pure exploration only, like a Carrick, right? While it can be good doing something similar, I feel like it's definitely much lower in that tier. It's a slow, big ship and it's got a lot of guns, right? So this ship is already got the idea behind it that you go out there and you deal damage and you have the cargo hold to clean up whatever you just done. So if anything, if this thing's out there exploring the verse, it's doing it in areas unknown to man, because then it's able to dish out firepower when needed if we run into somebody we don't know. And that what allows it to excel over something like in comparison the Carrick. Even though the Carrick's a bigger ship, I like to kind of use that as an example because they're kind of in the same realm of role. But that one requires a crew to man the guns and defend you, right? And you have no pilot control over how you're going to defend yourself except for rotating the ship. With the Corsair, if someone attacks you like a Vandal ship or something, you have the ability as a pilot to protect your crew, day in and day out. And that's something that gives it the edge in exploration, right? You're out there exploring an unknown world and you come across something that's very dangerous to you. You can actually handle it yourself. And that's hopefully what they're aiming for. But, the way it seems to be going, I think they're just kind of backing it down to be more of an explorer with less firepower, less control for the pilot, at least. Hopefully not too much more. Hopefully they don't change it more. Hopefully removing more weapons for the pilot would be the worst thing they could do.
Yeah, they're just making it more multi-crew right now. And I wonder,
right,
when you look at a ship like the Connie Andromeda, they call it something like a kind of an armed freighter. And they even say something similar with the Cutlass Black. They call it a medium freight ship with the ability to fight or something like that. And I wonder why they didn't just do that with the Corsair. Call it just like an armed freight ship, something that's used to go around the verse, do general things, generally get into some combat, but have space in the cargo hold to carry a lot of cargo with it. It feels like that would have fit better than Explorer, in my opinion.
I agree. The ship doesn't feel long range, even though it has a pretty good size quantum fuel tank. I mean, you're sitting a little over 6,000. That's still not that much in comparison to how big the universe really is going to get someday. Right. But yeah, I feel like this is more of a point A to B ship with a lot more of it. It's more extended because of that range. But I definitely feel like exploration is very loose with this ship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very loose title.
They left a lot up to the imagination there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're either exploring someone's hold or you're, exploring a planet.
So, as far as big nerfs and buffs and changes in these ships go, you've kind of already got at this throughout the show, but just to drill it home, you believe that these kinds of big changes are going to continue to hit every ship leading up to Star Citizen 1.0?
Yes, absolutely. I think we're going to see a change on a lot of ships between now and just 4.0 alone, especially with these bigger multi-crew ships. You're going to see a lot of changes, I feel like, because they have to make it work in the world of engineering. They have to make it work in the world of no health pool, right? You can't have a ship that's meant to be multi-crew be completely manable by just one person. That's their goal is if it's a multi-crew ship, it's a multi-crew ship. Whether that's a human crew or you're hiring an AI crew, that's hopefully someday up to you. But they don't want you to have all that ability, just one person with these ships. And I feel like we're going to see a lot of these changes over the next 3 to 6 months. potentially over the next year with these ships. And then you're going to see a lot of smaller ships get hit too with that, because now these smaller ships got to get a lot stronger, because when you get rid of the health pool, the next thing you have is components. And you see, like on a Gladius, the components are right there. They're right on the
they're
top
right
of the
next to
ship.
each other. Yeah.
And they're right next to each other. So you can't be able to disable this ship in the snap of a finger, or it's useless, right?
Yeah.
It's a pointless ship. So you're going to see these ships change dramatically too. Like they're going to get a lot more armor. Their components are going to be a lot harder to disable, and they're going to kind of come in line a little bit, because these ships need to be able to fight for more than 12 seconds before their components get wiped out.
It would have been nice if they had, throughout all this time, kind of informed people that, hey, there are some big milestones we have to hit where we will get past that point, and then we can start to really balance these ships to bring them to what they're supposed to be. It feels like engineering is a huge milestone when it comes to actually balancing the ships out in this game. And a lot of people simply didn't know engineering was coming until, just this year with these ISC episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I'm it's going to be interesting over the next little while. It's
one way to
hard
put
to
it,
say.
Yeah.
CitizenCon is going to, I personally, I feel like with a lot of longtime backers, CitizenCon is going to be a make it or break it. I really do. And I hope that's not the case. I hope I'm wrong. But I really hope they come out swinging.
Well, a lot of people don't like this focus on now moving into multi-crew gameplay. Now this finally started the part of the conversation. Do you think that CIG should focus on making more ships that are soloable to make up for the fact that more solo players won't be flying the bigger ships? And I want to be clear with people who are watching or listening. We are not saying that you won't be able to solo these larger ships. You absolutely will be able to fly any ship in the game solo. It's just a matter of how efficient it will be when you do it. And so I'm asking you, EvenLease, if CIG should focus on making more of these kind of soloable ships, say something around the size of like a C1 or a Zeus, so that people don't feel like they need to progress into something that's Constellation, Corsair, or Caterpillar sized in order to get the most out of the game, when those ships aren't really suited as well for a solo player.
It's hard for me. I don't want to promote the idea for them to make a bunch of new ships when they have a whole backlog of ships they still need to work on.
Yes.
But yes, if they're going to continue making new ships, I do think they need to have a bigger range of ships that can be used as a solo pilot or explorer or, handler, even if it's a smaller ship. You do have to have a big variety of those, right? You don't have much of a variety outside, under the Freelancer Max, the variety starts to slim down a lot. Mm-hmm. Between the Freelancer Max and up to like a Carrack, you have a lot more variety, but then you get into that multi-crew that you're talking about, right? If they're not going to do that, then they need to really open up the channel when it comes to, and I hate having to repeat myself here, because we see how the AI is now, but you got to really start building that AI background, because people aren't going to have the time always to have a human crew. I mean, they've really got to open up about having the AI crews in game sooner rather than later. That'll really help out. Even if they're working at half the capacity of an actual human crew, give them some negatives, right? Because they can't be perfect. They can't have an AI crew that's going to outperform a human crew, not without spending a lot of UEC, right? But I think that's where their focus should be. If they're going to really start hammering down this multi-crew aspect, they should really open up the ability for people to not have to rely on other people. There should be more options to controlling your ship. Because right now the biggest problem is come 4.0, the second someone takes off in their 600i, someone's going to set them on fire, and then you're out of your pilot seat. You're running across the ship to go put out a fire, and now your ship's doing whatever while somebody else is doing, probably boarding your ship as you're running to go put out a fire. And it's going to be a madhouse when you're a solo pilot.
They need to focus on communicating to new players that, like, you should learn this game in solo flyable ships. Like, you can fly a big ship, but please God, make sure that you understand the ins and outs of this game before you start putting yourself at risk with larger ships. Because you're right, that is that is going to be an incredibly hectic moment when you're getting shot at and you have to make the call of, do I just keep these alarms blaring that are telling me my ship is on fire and my components are taking damage, or do I get out of my seat, leave my ship sitting in space, and go and take care of this stuff?
Right.
And that's not something you really want to learn for the first time in a live environment, in a live fight environment. There's no tutorials to teach you it right now. So yeah, this is going to be a heck of a learning process. And the AI stuff that you're talking about, AI crew, I do think that's going to be a significant flashpoint as well for the community. With, you've got one side of the spectrum saying, hey, this is a fully realized game. Whether you're flying a solo ship or you're flying a big multi-crew ship, you got to have the crew that's needed for that, and not everything should be available to solo players. And you've got the other people who are coming in and saying, hey, most people who play these games are solo players. The game should be accessible in all ways for us. And then you got all the people in between there, but that feels like another big flashpoint, much like the cargo changes are, much like engineering likely will be. AI crew is probably going to be another place where people really disagree on how it should be done, and CIG should get ahead of that and state exactly the plans they have for this game so that people can understand that stuff.
Right. And while I definitely agree, it's definitely going to be a flashpoint. I wonder who would be against having an AI crew. I'm thinking about it. Like, that not every time you get on, right, are you going to have someone available to man your ship, and then you're going to have to end up paying somebody. So I just sometimes I think it would be nice, sooner or later to have that ability to have AI. But obviously it can't be a home run, right? Every time you have an AI crew, it can't be you go out and your AI manned Corsair and nothing can touch you, right? Because they need to be worse than you or worse than the player that would be manning that position normally, just to balance it out, right?
Yeah, I think that's where it really comes in, is like the balance of that, because it is a good deterrent from the pay to win kind of aspect of, like, you can just buy whatever big ship you want that has the most firepower, buy an AI crew, and then just dominate any ship you run into, versus, well, you got a big ship, but you still don't necessarily have the resources to run it, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's something you kind of mentioned was like when you're a solo pilot, one of the things you're going to have to consider too is when you're being shot at and a fire starts, is where is that fire? And a lot of people are going to get this right away, because if the fire is near a non-crucial component, you can just keep going, right, for a little longer and hopefully get yourself out of that situation. But you have to make that determination. Is this thing near a crucial component? Because if this fire is right next to your power housing and that takes that out, I mean, your whole ship could explode. And if you have something valuable as a single player, you got to run out there and take care of it before it's too late. And that's what's going to really change the field for multi-crew gameplay. You're going to see a lot more orgs with manned ships than you are solo players with manned ships. And that's going to be it's going to be definitely different.
That's one of the things I like most about engineering and components, is it really emphasizes knowing a ship really well. You start to stick to one particular ship because you know where the components are, you know how hard you can push them, you know how to engineer in that ship, you know the layout, as opposed to just, I'll just choose this ship this day because I feel like it. It kind of builds more connection to a specific ship for each person, and the way that you build it out. And I'm really, really excited for how they can continue to double down on components as a method of customization and so on and so forth, to make the game more deep in that regard.
Right. And the risk and reward is going to change differently too. It's going to drastically change, because right now any multi-cruise ship that's a multi-cruise ship typically has a cargo hold that's pretty big. There are some multi-cruise ships out there that don't have a cargo hold. I understand that, but there are quite a few out there, like the C2 Hercules, that has a massive cargo hold, and you're gonna have to make that decision of whether or not you want to fly this thing alone or not, and if it's going to be worth it. And so what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to up the reward for cargo as well, because now they're going to start upping the price of gas in game. We already saw somewhat of a change with that. Some of it was incidental, but a little bit too high. But they are going to change the cost of how much it takes to fuel your ship. And so taking out a massive ship like that without a crew with a lot of cargo that you just spent an hour loading manually. I mean, there's going to be a lot more risk now. So they got to really up the reward
Yeah.
for doing something like that. Cargo can't be, here's a cargo mission, transfer 100, 100 SCU of cargo for 12,000. That doesn't make any sense. Now that multi-crew is going to really slow everything down, because a ship like that is going to be prime real estate for anybody with a Drake Corsair that wants to explore their cargo hold and take
the
their
Corsair
cargo.
for what it was meant for.
Exactly.
The payouts and everything, there's just a lot more focus on what's going to happen with ships and how they work. Speaking of components, do you think that CIG will be able to effectively make components the real progression in this game, besides people just looking to buy new ships?
Man, that's that's hard to say. Because components, I feel like they're not going to be what everything's centered around. At first it will be for multi-crew, right? That's what they're kind of aiming for, just to get the ships flushed out. But progression wise, I feel like, it's all about going to be upgrading your ship over time, right? It's not about just changing the components out, which right now it's so easy to do. If you look at it price wise, changing certain components is pretty cheap. Do you think that'll change in price over time?
Yeah, I do. I think not only will it change in price, I think also there will be components that you just can't buy. You have to craft them. You have to find the recipes for them. They have, levels A through D, but they also have civilian, industrial, race, performance, military components. And I think if they can build a big enough range between the way these components work, based on how durable they are, how long one can last between repairs versus another, how long one can take damage, like you were saying, versus another. Maybe you have components that run better in high temperatures, so fires don't affect them as much. I feel like they could do a lot of stuff to make the components make more sense, and also boost prices to make them a little bit more intriguing to earn and make up for. But you said people would want to upgrade their ships over time. How could they do that if not with components? You mean upgrade between ships? Yeah,
between ships. And also, I feel like there is an untouched ground with Cloud Imperium games and ships right now that could really help differentiate people's vessels, right? And it's not just on the paint side of things, which someday we might be able to get the ability to customize the base paint in game and not have to always buy it off the store. That'd be nice. But also, I wish we could have a little bit more of an appearance customization someday. Like, you have your base Corsair, but you could change out the way certain aspects of the exterior of it look like. I think that would be fun as well when it comes to upgrading your ship and kind of personalizing it, and sometimes changing out these things or modifying the way it looks a little bit could come with an attribute change as well. So that'd be kind of interesting if they could ever go down that route. But when we're talking about components themselves, it's interesting because they say they want it to be an MMO, so you definitely have that ability, like that option of it making it like a rarity system, right? Where you have your common jump drive, or you have your extremely rare jump drive, or you have your legendary jump drive. I feel like they should, that would be really cool, but to a point, right? I would feel terrible that only 3 people have a legendary power system, because they got really lucky with a loot crate, right?
Yeah, it should not be RNG or anything like that.
Right. It has to be like achieved, earned, right? Something that it definitely shows your commitment to that ship or to that process of gaining that component. And I think that would be really cool. Because RNG is kind of like, I can already see the threads.
That'd be a problem. I definitely think there should be a clear-cut way to achieve these things, whether it's going to a specific place or maybe doing a mission for a specific person. Like, imagine if you were only able to get the top industrial quantum drive if you reached the top level for any industrial corporation. But even reaching that top level wasn't quite it. That level of that corporation then gave you the contact for a specific mission giver. And then if you do that mission for that mission giver, then you can get that quantum drive. And yeah, only a few people get that, but that really goes to show just how in-depth with the industrial system you are. And that's not the only way to do it. Maybe you can find a recipe and craft it yourself. but I feel like the more high level opportunities, the more long-term opportunities they can give to unlock that kind of stuff, and the bigger boosts those kinds of things can give to your ship performance, the better they can allow for sideways progression rather than just yearning after the next best ship kind of thing. You know, if you have
Absolutely.
a Carrack, you shouldn't necessarily want to go to an Odyssey to improve your exploration. There should be ways to make the Carrack the best explorer for the things you're doing versus the Odyssey, which might be the best explorer for somebody who's a little more industrial focused or something, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. And I think that would be really fun. You know, it's going to be interesting to see how they do missions like that with rewards like that.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not on, I think like in certain, I think, you know, it's hard to say because right now, like I'm looking at the F7, the Mark II, and then looking at the military version, there's a lot of upset people that they can't do this mission chain now and get that upgrade, right?
Mhm.
And I feel like limiting, I hear that that might come back someday, but limiting to it to a timed like event to get a certain component might not be so much fun.
Yeah.
Especially if it's something that's going to way outclass the rest of the components. That's interesting. But like doing a mission giver that everybody has a chance, or going through the rep system and gaining these certain components, I think that would be fantastic. Just like gaining certain clothing items, or, you know, getting a specific ship paint for being up there in the high rep, you know, that would be really cool. Something to really
Yeah.
show that you've gone this far with this ship. And that would be really cool if it was tied to the ship too. So it's not just about switching ships and then the rep's just that, you know.
Yeah.
You have your base rep with cargo hauling, but then you have a tied rep to it with this ship with cargo hauling. And I think that would be really cool to allow you to advance that ship through phases, so you don't have the need to feel like, oh, I need something else, right?
Yeah.
I like that idea. It's really,
Yeah.
really neat idea.
I think that would be really good for the game, and I hope we start to hear more about that after engineering becomes more solidified. But EvenLease, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I think this was a good talk about ships, their balance, their nerfs, their buffs, their drama, all that stuff. But before you head out, I'd love for you again to let the folks know where they can find your content and what that kind of content is if they missed it in the beginning.
Yeah, so I appreciate you having me on here. You know, everybody has their opinion on everything that's going on with Star Citizen right now, and that's amazing. And I can't wait to see how the future of Star Citizen really pans out. You can find me on YouTube. You know, just head over to my channel. It's just the same name here, EvenLease. And anytime you guys, you know, ever want to look at a ship without having to buy it in game, I'm where you want to go. Hopefully. I mean, if you don't, that's fine too. But I just really love giving you an advanced look at a ship and letting you see what it has going for it, the way it looks, the way it flies, the stats behind it, my personal opinion on it, which that's all that is, just a personal opinion. But yeah, I'm here to really open that window for everybody, and hopefully it helps out.
It's a good resource, folks. Thanks again, and thank you all for listening or watching. If you're on YouTube and you want to find us in audio so you can throw it on while you're on your drive or sitting at work, we're on all audio platforms. Just search up the Launch Sequence Podcast or check out our other one, the Citizen Central Podcast. Either way, thank you all for watching. Thank you, supporters, for being here live. Hope you enjoyed this. I will see you all next week.